Hello and welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour, the weekly bridge to the future of the piano tech community. I'm David Anderson.
And I'm Ethan Janney. And we're here to ask great questions, and then we'll shut up and listen to some of the authorities, experts, and most outstanding personalities in our little world of pianos.
So, put on your best set of headphones and let's get started.
Welcome everyone to Piano Tech Radio Hour. We are having a fun day today with a kind of a round table with several fun characters, including one new personality we haven't seen on Radio Hour before. And I guess I'm going to leave it to David to make an introduction to him, but I will just start off by saying, of course, we're brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, where you can learn from cutting-edge information from great instructors all over the world. And today we're actually having a live masterclass as well from Del Fondrick on restoring soundboards using epoxy, which has been dubbed resurrecting dead pianos, or as I thought maybe we might call it the Lazarus technique. But it's going to be fun, and it's just in a couple hours. So if you haven't registered for that yet, we'll make sure to put a link in the chat to register for that. And I will introduce, I'll just say who we have here, and I'll hand it over to David to give an overview. So we brought in Carl Lieberman, who's been on before. We brought in Arlen Harris. These guys are bi-coastal, so Carl's on the West Coast in Cali, and Arlen's out there in New York, although he may be traveling. And then of course David, my co-host, returns. We missed him last week, but he's here again. And our special guest for today is Frank Wolf, who is an incredible recording engineer out there in Los Angeles that David has a close relationship with. So that's all I'll say, and I'll hand it over to David to give a little bit more of an introduction.
Before you go, I'm still only seeing the 5 thumbnails. Ethan, am I supposed to be seeing a big full?
It depends on your view. Yeah, I don't know. You might select.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, can you see people
up
now?
in the right-hand corner, above the.
Yeah. I see.
Check. Okay.
Yeah, we've got people just to give you
Right.
a sense of where you're at, Frank. We have people tuning in from all over the world here, primarily piano technicians who take care of pianos, or people who are industry professionals, might sell pianos, have piano dealerships, things like that. And we've got people in Latin America, we've got people in Europe, we've got people sometimes from the tiny island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. We've got a lot of regulars here, so we have a good time and we just talk about pianos and how to make them sound good.
Cool.
That's right. And there's people on YouTube, there's people on Facebook, so there's quite a few people watching us. So I'm really happy that all of you are here for this, because this is a special deal. We have 2 piano technicians, Mr. Lieberman and Mr. Harris, who have been around recording studios and recording pianos for 4 decades. Especially Mr. Harris it has been like a monk of concert pianist for recording sessions, and hundreds of recording sessions and concerts. And they're both highly qualified to talk about recorded piano sound. So we're going to have a awesome roundtable with those 2 men and me and Ethan, and then my brother, really, Frank Wolf, is one of the best acoustic recording engineers in the world. He's worked for some of the greatest film composers in the world. In the early part of his career, he did albums with super famous rock and roll acts and singer-songwriters and bands. He did Randy Newman's music for Toy Story movies. He's done dozens and dozens of films with world-class film composers. We're going to play a couple of cuts in a little while, one from an album that he recorded with an artist that I introduced, or that he and that my wife and I introduced Frank to, and he recorded her album on a piano that my team had restored and this artist had fallen in love with. And it's one of the greatest acoustic piano records I've ever heard. We're going to hear another one from a musical called Faust by Randy Newman. And just to hear the level that Frank is operating on. And in fact, we might as well do that now, Mr. Janney. You want to play? The first cut is a singer, songwriter, composer named Ruut, R-U-U-T. And she's beautiful inside and out, and she's an incredible singer, songwriter, and piano player, and you'll hear her. This is a song called Anchor that was recorded, I think, 5-6 years ago. Oh, man. That's beautiful. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Ruud. Jesus, that was beautiful.
It occurs to me listening to that, unless this is too soon to sort of start, as a recording engineer, there are a lot of requirements on a piano that are not exactly the same as, having a beautiful piano in your living room or on a stage, at a show or anything in between. In this case, we recorded in a sort of garage space at Tanya and David's house. And the challenge really is that she sang and played live. Everything there you heard is live. There's nothing corrected. There's nothing pitched. There's nothing overdubbed. There's nothing tweaked, nothing. It was a live performance. And so the challenge there is to try to get capture her vocal as best as possible. And also know that whatever leakage is going into the back of her vocal mic is going to add significantly to the piano sound. So, moving that vocal mic a little bit one way or the other affects the phase as the sound hits the mics that were in the piano and also the back of her mic. In a live show, you might use a dynamic mic that doesn't have much pickup in the back end, and it's a very close-up mic. This was a very old U47 tube mic that picks up all the way around. And so consequently, the balance between the piano and the microphones is critical. And to my ear, it just sounds great. The other thing, of course, with a pianist like Ruut, and you see this a lot in pretty much every session, the piano has to be able to handle somebody playing really light or hard. The low end this piano, the low end, just sings. She hits those low notes nice and soft, and they're just like, they give you goosebumps. And when she hits the high end or the mid highs hard, the sound doesn't break. It's still round and warm. It gets brighter, of course, but it's not harsh in any way. And these are the things, that I always have to look for depending on what I'm recording, whether it's a rock and roll session or a jazz session or a 100-piece orchestra with a live piano sitting in there. So anyway, hearing that really reminded me of the particular challenge of having her voice live along with the piano and what that provides. If you guys are all familiar with Aretha's song "Respect," so that was live. She sang and played live with the band live. One take. It was done in 5 minutes. Which is, to me, to be able to capture that as an engineer is magic. When you can capture an iconic vocal like that and get the whole band and it all doesn't sound like mush, that's spectacular, and it brings tears to your eyes. So anyway, if you want to.
So this is Frank and everybody else. This is kind of what I dreamed about, kind of a master class on what it takes to get a really good sound on a piano. I know that all of us as piano technicians at one point or another are involved in recording studios and recording pianos. And this is just massively valuable information. So talk about how you got that sound, Frank. Well, how many microphones you used and how many channels you used. And
it's actually simple. It was 3 microphones. It was 2 in the piano and 1 on her voice. The 2 in the piano because it's not meant to be a real close up on the hammer sound. They were, if you imagine looking down on the piano, I don't technically know what it's called, but where the sort of waist, where the piano curves in.
It's called the curve.
Excellent. I love being able to use the technical term. If you go, sort of straight up from the curve, and then the microphones are pointed down and at an angle away from each other, sort of high and low.
How far away from the curve? How far away from the rim?
So in this case, they were pretty much directly above the rim, about a foot, maybe 15 inches.
Wow.
The lid was wide open, up on the high stick.
On the high stick.
And again, the one mic was pointing sort of towards the middle of the low end. That would be this one. Well, you guys are backwards from me. And the other one pointing up sort of towards the higher part of the piano, but not right at the hammers. So down.
And is that pretty much a standard configuration for acoustic piano? There
are a few standards. There's also some people record with an MS, which is to say one mic pointing. If you kind of go up the stick and away 6 inches, maybe near the top. So maybe 10 inches down from the top of the stick, and one mic is facing sort of right into the piano, and the other one is at 90 degrees.
Interesting.
It's an MS configuration, which means that the one that's pointing left and right is actually out of phase from the one that's pointing straight forward. And when they add up, you get one side, and when they subtract, you get the other side. So it makes a stereo. Older recording, because with the advantage with MS is that when it goes to mono, the 2 sides cancel 100%. You just get a straight mono. There's never any question of like something phasing out or being weird.
So that's good for the radio and good for.
Well, radio is stereo. I mean, everything is stereo now, at least. But that was one, and you got quite a roomy sound. So if you were in a beautiful room, that contributed to the sound of the piano. And then the other thing, which is more sort of either bright jazz or a rock and roll session, is kind of right on top of the hammers, maybe 6 inches up, slightly behind the hammers and pointed at the hammers. And I would say maybe 2 feet or 30 inches apart. So one of them is up at the high octave of the low end, and the other one is sort of in the octave above middle C, or maybe the G above, above that.
Yeah.
And they're literally right on the hammers. And from a practical point of view, when I'm recording,
That's for more like a rock and roll session.
your face. And I've gotten in the habit, from a practical point of view, if I'm recording a score, a Randy Newman score, or an Alan Menken score, or a Terence Blanchard score, or any one of those things, you cue to the next, whether it's going to be orchestral or whether it's going to be more of a sort of in-your-face piano sound. So I routinely put 2 sets of mics, one on the hammers and one out, out as I previously described.
Wow.
And I record both on 4 separate tracks.
Right.
And that way, from cue to cue, I'm not out there going, oh shit, I got to move the mics for this cue, because you never have time to do that.
Ah, wow.
Rather than compromising one side or the other, I record both and I use the one that seems to be appropriate for the cue.
Carl, Arlen, you got questions or comments about what Frank's saying?
Go ahead, Carl.
Well, I would say 2 things. One of the things that I abide by in the studio all the time is I never touch the mics. I don't move the mics. They're very, very carefully placed by someone like Frank, and I'm religious about not moving them an iota. What'd you say?
And I that.
And the other thing, when you were recording Root with the bleed through, I've had the privilege of working on Elton John's last 3 albums, and one of the things that Elton does is he has we have a piece of foam 4 inches thick, cut in a triangle, that sits behind the music desk and goes up to the lid on a high stick and kind of fills in. So they have the 2 mics coming from the side, just as Frank described, and then they have the vocal mic for Elton in the front of the piano. But there's no bleed through from the piano because of this huge piece of foam, and then they have blankets over the entire piano. So they create isolation so that the vocal mic gets the vocal and the piano mics get the piano.
And that is something I should have mentioned. If I'm doing a rhythm section, for example, at Capitol, and I've got the whole band in the room and a singer in the vocal booth, then there are very heavy quilted blankets over the piano, and oftentimes, as you say, a sort of triangle in front. The problem with that in Root's case was that it also sort of tends to mute the piano sound a little bit.
Right.
For this album, the album is called Steinway Sessions. It was about how that particular piano inspired Root to write that arc of songs. And so we wanted the piano to sing as well as it could and have her be able to sing live. So although, Carl, I would always do that sort of thing in a tracking situation, or especially if I had tracks and somebody singing live, but it affects the piano sound because it doesn't let the piano sing in the room. And in Root's case, we wanted to do both. In the other song you'll hear, the piano was blanketed, and it's a much closer, more album sort of sound.
And let's hear that now.
Sure. So let me just set this up. Randy wrote a comedy musical version of the novel Faust, which is a German novel. It's a bet between God and the devil, that the devil basically says, with a little encouragement, he can turn anyone to the dark side, if you will. And God says, no, man is inherently good, and given time, he will choose the right path. So they make a bet on in Randy's version. It's a freshman at Notre Dame who's been a freshman for 6 years, and Randy and his producer manager Peter Asher pitched the idea to Warner Brothers to do an album to precede what would be a show with all these big stars. So James Taylor plays the role of God, and Randy plays the role of the devil, and we're visited by Bonnie Raitt and Linda Ronstadt and Elton John, and Don Henley plays the role of Faust. So the song you're about to hear is at the beginning when they've chosen the kid, or they're about to choose the kid, and the devil and God are singing about, how they're going to do it and what heaven is like, and God gets kind of worked up, and Randy, as the devil, is saying, chill out, man, relax. So that's the song you're going to hear. Relax, enjoy yourself.
Let me, I'm looking through the files here. Is that what it's called? Relax, enjoy yourself. Okay. And is there another version in the Faust folder? Is there a difference between the one in the Faust folder and the one outside of it?
It doesn't matter. They're the same.
Doesn't matter. Okay, cool. I'll get that started. Oh.
When I'm feeling down,
Can you hear that?
worried about every little thing, I take a look around. This is what I say. Relax, enjoy yourself. It's only a glorious game. There's fruit trees growing in an open field, and wild roses blooming down a country lane. Look around, old chum, slow it down, old chum, or you never will succeed. You never will succeed.
Look,
relax, enjoy yourself. It's all just a wonderful game. There are rivers and forests and mountains high. There's the deep green ocean and the pale blue sky. Let it go and then you will know, old friend, that you never will succeed. You never succeed.
It must be very trying to be bad all the time, vicious and cruel and mean, when there's so much beauty all around us to be seen, and so very little time in which to see it all and feel it all. So little time. Perhaps when you were little, no one held you in their arms and told you that they loved you very much. Perhaps we were embittered by your fall from grace.
how long have you been dead?
2 months.
Do you miss your friends?
Yes, I miss them. I've tried to make friends here, but it's hard.
You were a good girl, cut down in your prime.
Yes,
The man who shot you in the head in that Burger King in Tucson, well, he never will be punished, you know. He will move to Big Pine, California, become the richest man in your county. While that may not be much, it's enough. When he dies, 65 years from today, with his loved ones all around him, he'll be whisked right up to heaven. He won't pass go or have to wait. He'll just march right through the goddamn gate. And why? You may ask yourself why. For thousands and thousands of years I've asked myself why.
Faith, contrition, sincere contrition, confession, sincere confession.
Did you want me to pause, guys, or keep going? Yeah.
You know, I could listen to the whole record, but that would
Yeah.
be a productive use of our time here.
Yeah.
I can't hear you. David, you're muted.
David's muted. Let's get him
Oh,
unmuted.
sorry.
Go ahead, David.
That's a tour de force. That's an incredible recording.
Thank you.
So, you know, some of the greatest recording techniques in the world, plus some of the world's greatest musicians and singers. Jesus, that's amazing.
You're hearing there a little Chinese girl who was killed by some lunatic that goes into a Burger King.
Wow.
And goes to heaven. And she's shunned in heaven because as a young Asian girl, she has pissed off all her classmates because she always raises the bar of the grading scale. This is all, I'm saying this all within the satire of Randy's play.
Yeah.
But it sort of highlights, you know, the stereotypes that we all take from the world. Oh, you know, these Asian kids go to college and they're raising the bar and it's not fair. And so Randy turns it into a satire. You know, she's talking about the fact that she's in heaven, and later on she says, you know, but nobody will talk to me and nobody's nice to me. And of course the devil says, yeah, and the guy that shot you is gonna repent and ask for salvation, and so he gets to go straight to heaven after living a long natural life. Anyway, it was quite a.
So what's it like for you, Frank, to realize that you're working with the best people in the world?
Well, I mean, that's why I got into it, is to be, you know, I grew up playing piano, but I was never the kind of pianist that could be in a recording environment. I grew up studying classical music, and I was pretty good, but not great, certainly not at a professional level. And at a certain point, my aptitude for sort of more nerd, you know, technical stuff also came into play. And so engineering and producing seemed like a great combination. And I played piano. I think I was always, you know, really cognizant of how piano was supposed to sound. And I spent a lot of time and a lot of studying of different ways to mic it and different microphones and what different microphones would yield for different sounds. You know, what accentuated what, and so on. And so now when I'm in the room with, you know, 95 players and a great composer, or in a room with the best rhythm section musicians in the world, it's thrilling to me because I get to stand back and listen and go, geez, it sounds great. And I'm a part of it. And because of my musical background, I'm more than just twiddling knobs and getting the sound. I'm also generally involved in picking takes or making comments, or, you know, my musical taste ends up helping inform the production as well as the engineering.
So if you were to tell this assembled group of humans what the kind of the ideal or the piano sound that you look for to be kind of the basis of most recording, well, how would you describe it?
Well, I mean, aside from sort of more specialty stuff,
I'm talking about, yeah,
I mean,
vast majority of
out-of-tune upright. There's nothing like an out-of-tune upright, but by and large, we're talking about, you know, almost always a 9-foot piano, sometimes a little smaller. Oddly enough, Capitol Studios doesn't have big pianos, and they're not the greatest pianos in the world. But the scoring stages have great pianos, and they're 9-footers. And, you know, what I look for is a piano that when hit hard won't crap out, won't be too edgy. I can add brights to something and make it sound a little more rock and rolly, but I can't take that away and make it sound warm and orchestral. So I'm looking for a full range, a big, beautiful low end when played when a note is hit softly, it'll ring for, till after lunch. Round, warm tone, even, really even. The touch has to be really even, I guess, well regulated. If you hit the piano, I run into this a lot, where if you hit a note really softly, the hammer doesn't hit up and then bounce back. It hits up and then it mutes the string. It doesn't fall back properly. I'm sure you all know exactly the failure that I'm talking about. That was what was happening at that Warner Brothers piano before David came in and saved the day.
I've got a question here from the chat. Do you mind me popping it in here?
Oh, no, I want them.
Nancy says, and how do you blend your taste with the artist's wishes diplomatically?
Nancy,
diplomatically? There's a question mark at the end.
Really good question.
I'm assuming diplomatically, but maybe not. I don't know.
Thank you for that. It's a really good question because as an engineer, and I was just talking to somebody about this recently, I consider half of my job to be the knowledge of miking and engineering and balancing and all the effects that you can put on it, and using the technology that I know and have learned over 40 years, and in my imagination being able to sort of know how I want it to sound and know how to get there technically. The other half of my job is balancing the room, the control room that I'm with, which is to say a composer, a director, the studio producers, a whole team of people. Obviously, my job is to satisfy the composer and the film director if I'm working on a film, or the producer of the record and the artist if I'm working on a record. So although, I always try to bring my taste into the room, there are certainly times when I have to leave it at the door. And I will argue diplomatically if I think that something is really going in the wrong direction. But ultimately, if the composer or the director wants something and I think it's a big mistake, I may give it a bit of an argument and go, are you sure? Let's listen to it both ways. But if that's the way they want it, then it's my job to give it to them the way they want it. And especially in a film, in the long run, music is playing second fiddle to the picture and the dialogue. So, at a certain point, I have to let it go and go, look, the composer wants it this way. The director's happy. I love it just like that. You have to let it go. But it's a really good question. And I really feel that a big part of my job is how I get along in the room with people. And when David said that I'm, loved, which it's always nice to hear that from the outside, but one of the things I do pride myself in is being able to manage the room in such a way that if there's tension, I try to calm it down. If there's a question about how to go, I try to always have a suggestion but not insist on it.
Frank, if I could just say, we don't have as central a role as you do, but that's half of our job also, is our people skills and calming things down and letting, that's half of it. Half of it is the technical stuff that we bring and half of it is the people skills.
Yep. And especially when things are not going well, if you're called in at lunchtime because somebody hit the piano really hard and it banged out of tune and everybody's around you and talking and you've got to get them to shut up, but you don't want to go, hey, shut up. That's those times, or when we're running behind schedule in the control room, or there's some tension between the composer and the director, and then at the same time a mic goes down or something's being changed out in the room. How do you cover that time, that couple of minutes that the producer from the studio is looking at his watch and going, we're wasting time, and the director goes, I need this rewritten now, and the composer's scratching his head going, what do we do? And literally, I will purposely, tell an old story or divert and distract until, okay, hey guys, we're ready, let's go. And you obviously have to do the same thing. If you're tweaking a couple of notes, you've got to find a way to get people to settle down around you while they're, busily eating lunch and get your work done so that when lunch is over, the piano's back.
Oh,
What a quick interjection there. We've had Sally Phillips has come on here before. She does a lot of concert work, and
Yep.
she mentions something a lot of people don't think about: all of the costs involved per minute, per second, per hour. As you're going in the hall, they have to pay someone in a concert situation just to come in and turn on the lights for you and hang out and all this stuff. So I don't know if you or anybody else here, do you have any thoughts, comments about how that plays a role in the way that people behave and, choose to speak about things or not, or whatever? Any thoughts on that?
One thing I could say is, in round numbers, if you're recording for 3 or 4 days with a 100-piece or a 95-piece orchestra, you're talking about $500,000 in a week, or 400,
Right.
A lot of money. I mean, maybe not relative to a $200 million film, but a lot of money when you're considering the music budget and how small that is relative to the rest of the making of a movie. So they're really worrying about every minute. If you go 1 minute overtime, you pay for 15 minutes with the orchestra. There's a lot of organization that goes into play in terms of, okay, we need to do some brass overdubs on this particular cue, but we're not going to do them right now. We'll wait till the end of the day. We'll let the whole orchestra go. We'll keep the brass section in overtime, so we're only paying 8 guys for 15 minutes instead of 100 guys for 15 minutes. And when you've got a director who wants to hear it right now because he's got to leave for a nighttime, voiceover session, you still have to balance that issue of, it's expensive. Now, I don't have any idea what it is when you're, playing a concert at Royce Hall or Carnegie or, whatever. Then you've got, like you said, guys turning on the lights and sound guys. I have no idea what that cost looks like. I will tell you that I saw a solo piano concert at Royce Hall with a guy who's playing one of the Beethoven sonatas, and a string broke.
Wow.
And Jeffrey Kahane, whoever knows who that is.
Wow, I do.
Yeah, big time.
And Jeff, the piano, a string just went boing, and he stopped playing, turned to the audience, and he said, I've been doing this a long time, and that's never happened to me. And we're going to take a little break, and we'll be back. And they gave the audience a break, and there was a technician. It might have been you, Carl.
I think it was probably Terry. I have worked at Royce, but I think that was probably Terry.
Terry Meredith.
So anyway, he as quickly as possible changed the string and tried to get it so that it would hold tune. I guess that's what he did. I don't imagine he would have just taken that one string out. Maybe you guys would know better than me.
Where was
in that situation, I would just take the string out.
Yeah, where was the string?
I don't remember. Somewhere in the middle of the piano. Not
Tough. Yeah, you have to take the string out.
Because I don't think you could get it to stay in tune right away, right?
Not sufficiently.
Yeah, that's what I would think. Anyway, I mean, I know it's a weird aside, but it was so. I mean, I've been in the studio for 40 years, and he'd been concertizing for as long, and I've never seen that happen either.
It's the worst nightmare of a concert for a string to break.
Right. Apparently.
Thanks for going into that a little bit. I think it's useful to, for people who aren't as familiar with recording and concert situations, just to remember that it's not just them that's getting paid in the moments that they're working, and it's a balance of all these factors on the grander scale. David, you're about to say something. I've got another question from the chat.
Oh, please.
So you don't have to list them all. Yeah, go ahead.
Add one thing. From a standpoint of it being in a studio, whether it's a record or a film, and Arlen and Carl can certainly attest to this, the piano gets tuned every morning. So if you're working 5 days in a row, it's obviously going to be pretty close, but it's going to be touched up every morning. And sometimes if it's a really pianistic score and if it's bombastic, they'll come back and check it at lunchtime.
Right.
So, because obviously, you don't want to be 5 hours into a session or coming in early the next morning and the piano is, out. So anyway, go ahead, Ethan.
So yeah, I was going to say you don't have to list them all. The question was, what are the 25 of your favorite piano recordings, i.e., that you or someone else has worked on? Maybe a couple among the 25, or if you have them listed, you can go one by one if you want. No, but just I think there's a sense of curiosity about what recordings do you look to, maybe even as inspiration or your style or the way that you think about well done work.
I don't want to seem weird about this, but I spend so much time listening to music that I'm recording that I don't really spend very much time listening to other stuff. I mean, I know that's terrible. As a much younger person, listening mostly to classical music, David, I want to see some steam coming out of your ears right now.
Hey.
I spent years listening to a Wilhelm Kempff recording of Bach's Goldberg Variations. David and I have fought about this for close to 20 years now.
Yeah.
I love that recording. But honestly, I'm going to pass on that. I don't even know. Most times I'm more carried away by the music than I am by the actual sound. And unless the sound tweaks me as being something distinctly bad, I just accept it as part of the music. I will say, hearing Root again, I'm really happy with how that piano sounds.
Oh.
I'm really happy with that.
I've heard a piano technician's job described as kind of removing the awareness of the piano from the player's awareness, right? They want to have as direct a connection between the piano player and the music as possible. And it's almost as if the piano is an obstacle and you want to remove any type of obstacles that you can. And it sounds like that's a little bit of your concept of recording. Someone who's the recording engineer, it's kind of like you want to have to notice the recording engineer. If you did, then you notice maybe the mistake. If you can hear the music and the music is the thing that you notice, then maybe that's something that you are drawn to, right?
Arlen, Arlen has probably had more interaction with pianists and this type of thing. What would you say about this?
I think that it's, first of all, I'd like to start by saying that I don't think there's a group of people, professionals in the music profession that are so, not to make a terrible pun, but in tune with what piano technicians and tuners do is studio engineers and some producers or some studio producers like Frank. And they deal in the world of sound, just as Frank was saying, as we do, but on a much larger scale. They can actually create and have the responsibility for creating sound canvases and environments, general environments that they can do in that controlled environment of a studio, whereas we're focused on one thing, that is the piano, and to make the pianist happy, just what you were saying, Ethan. And it's quite remarkable. They combine so many talents of dealing with their concepts, and they have to have a big area of concepts for different projects, but they're working with sound. They also have to have an incredible amount of knowledge in technology and also electronics, and they constantly have to update their skills because technology is a moving target. So, and combined with what Frank pointed out, the human relations aspect is huge, as it is with us. There's a difference between working in a recording studio as to working on a concert stage. Concert stage is a whole different animal. These are the two areas I feel that are the most complicated, difficult, but rewarding in our profession as piano technicians. But on the stage, live performance, you have certain situation, the string can break, there's emergencies that come up, and public relations is important. In the studio, it's a very controlled environment, and things come up, but I was going to just bring out these 2 points. I don't want to take a lot of time because this is time of Frank's, and we want to hear his valuable information. But for those piano technicians out there who may not have done a lot of work in studio, there's two things that we really have to pay attention to. That piano has to be solidly tuned. I mean, every single pin, because one unison goes out. You're talking about an expensive project. Everything stops. The piano tuner has to go in and tune that note, and it could come into thousands of dollars when you look at salaries involved. Everything has to be perfectly tuned. The other responsibility we have that's major is we're responsible for any little tiny sound in the piano, minute sounds that get in the way of the recording that can be picked up by the microphones. So sometimes I'm asked to go into the control room and put on the set of cans. I usually bring my own. That's headphones. I usually bring my own favorite ones, Sennheisers, that I can hear what's going on outside, but I can focus in, or maybe a couple others. When I'm asked to do so, I just sit and listen, just for finding any imperfection I can when I'm asked, and I'll point out. Many times I'm not invited or asked to go into the control room. In that case, very wisely, you have to stay away and be unseen. And sometimes you just are contracted to go in to do your work and leave. And as Frank said, maybe you go back at lunchtime and touch up. So you have to, I have a great respect to, after these years I've been watching the engineers, how they manage all of these things at the same time, and how their human relations, how they relate to people. And sometimes there's some very tense interrelation things, and I could go into many stories and specifics, but these people have a tough job, and it's a real talent. And as far as listening to different recordings, he's not able to answer the first 25, or the best favorite 25, like I wouldn't be able to. But if you just explore different recordings, there's so many, and just learn and listen, and you'll hear different sounds. It's like developing your taste. I hope I didn't take too much time, but I wanted to interject some of these things that engineers, it's a really very difficult job, and it takes a lot of talent in human relations, and they're sound creators, sound builders, and we have a job basically to just, I know our job also in a third tier is to make the pianist feel comfortable, just like he makes people feel comfortable. We have to attend to their needs. Many times I'll say to a pianist, "Oh, this is the same piano you worked on last time, remember? Oh yeah, I like that piano. Yeah, it's the same one, and it's a different room." And if they're a little nervous, "Can I get you anything? Do you want the music desk in a little deeper or a little adjusted?" You say, "Oh, you're sounding really good today. Your piano is really behaving today." Any little comment you can make just to give them a little support, because it's nerve-wracking for them too.
Oh,
That's all I care to say for now, because I wouldn't want to get in the way of Frank's information.
well, come on, Arlen. You have incredibly valuable input. I just wanted to say that I just realized that recording engineers have to do the same thing piano technicians have to do, which is to develop a tonal memory of what a great piano sounds like, so that you can recreate it when you actually get there. Piano technicians have to do that, and in voicing and doing the things that we do, and recording engineers have to do that. They have to know in their tonal memory, inside their heads, what really good piano tone is, so then they can approximate it with the piano that they're working with. That
I'd actually like to say something about that. I wish it were as simple as that. Oh yeah, that's a great piano tone. That's what I'm going to get. It's different for every score. It's different for every record. It's different depending on who's playing it. A lot of times whoever's in tuning, in the morning before the session starts, and I'll kind of listen to it, maybe even tweak a little bit, and then the guy comes in and plays, and it's a completely different touch.
Right.
So, I have sort of, I would say, more of a toolbox, and I try to sort of guess as best as I can what this particular, or get some demos ahead of time of what this score is going to sound like. I sort of rotate, excuse me, 4 different kinds of microphones. Telefunken 251s, which are very old, and also AKG C12s, which are very old. Newer microphones, Neumann KM86s, although mine are heavily modified, and also Neumann KM88s, which is not a very well-known mic. It's a nickel capsule, and it has the advantage of being bright and have a lot of clarity, but still being warm. People love them on trumpets for the same reason. You can hit it pretty hard, and it still sounds round and warm. So,
quick question, just to interrupt, because you said something. When you say heavily modified, what does that mean? Like, just curious.
The guy in Oregon who's a specialist with old microphones, and have the time to give up a pair of mics for months because it takes him a long time. He's that busy. He changes some of the components. He changes. He takes pop filters out if you're not going to use it for like a KM86 could be a vocal mic, but I don't ever use it for vocals, so I don't need, plosive filters. So he takes those out. He goes through the capsules and picks the best ones and makes sure they're facing forward, because a cardioid microphone actually has 2 capsules, one front and one back, and by adding them up out of phase, it gives you a loud spot in the front of the microphone and a dead zone in the back of the microphone, so that you're not picking up things behind the mic. So
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
I'm going to cut you real quick just because I want to say a couple things. One, we're about 10 minutes out. We usually end at the hour. And I'll say a few more things in a minute. Thank you so much for sharing this information. What I'm noting, and I think maybe a lot of other technicians are noting, I get asked by clients, oh, by the way, how do I mic this thing? How do I mic this piano? And I'm just kind of like, I don't know, man, I'm the piano tuner. So just to be able to have this resource, that we can point people to and say, here's what a really great recording engineer does when he's miking piano. So I appreciate you sharing this information. It is something that a lot of people struggle with. How do you mic a piano?
I would add to that, because my arsenal of microphones are mostly very old. And I have a lot of times where a composer says to me, or a pianist says to me, what should I put on my piano at home? In this day and age, a lot of guys are sent a session and asked to play piano or drums or any other instrument on it, and then send it back to the composer, because we can't all get in one room right now. And it's also less expensive to have a guy do it at home, and budgets are tighter. And I generally try to recommend microphones that are newer. You can buy off the shelf. They're not going to break. They're not going to be persnickety. They're not going to have power supplies and cables that are 50 years old. And in those cases, depending on budget, I'd usually either say like a Mojave 100, or if you've got some money to spend, and if a guy's got a good 9-foot grand in his house, he theoretically should have some money to spend on mics. Sennheiser MKH 800s are a really good pair of microphones. They're a little pricey. They're $3,500 a piece in round numbers, but they're great for everything. Not only piano. If you're a composer and you're playing guitar and you're playing piano and it's a great all-around microphone, and it's a great piano microphone.
So, just to be real clear, to get the kind of the bottom rung of a world-class microphone is going to cost you like $1,500, correct?
At least.
Okay.
Yeah, at least. I mean, the Sennheiser that I'm talking about is twice that.
Yep, got it.
And that is a world-class. So that's a great microphone. Since I don't generally buy those mid-range and lower-range mics, there's a lot that I'm not familiar with. I mean, I have 60-year-old, 70-year-old M50s that are the mics that you typically see on a Decca tree above the composer if you're ever seeing pictures of a scoring stage. And those things are, I mean, you can't buy them anymore, but if you could, they'd be, for 3 of them, it'd probably be, $50,000 or something.
Wow.
They're expensive.
Wow.
Or more. I'm trying to think of what else.
Ethan, is there any other questions you have, or Carl or Arlen?
The one thing that has always astounded me in working with a big orchestra is that there are certain instruments that oftentimes they look at as a soloist, and that could be the piano or a French horn, first violin, first cello, maybe one of the woodwinds. So when you have a piano part that is complicated and you're asking that guy to sit in front of 90 guys and play it live while the rest of the orchestra is also playing, and it's a solo, there's very little that's more impressive to me than that. One of the other songs on Faust is a song that Linda Ronstadt sings, and unfortunately the title of the song is escaping me at the moment, but we did it in San Francisco at Lucas Ranch, and we brought Robbie Buchanan up to play it. And he was so nervous about it, he asked for the music a couple of days early, and he practiced it. Because unlike a rhythm score where they just put hash marks and chords and you kind of play as you go, this was written out every note all the way through. And it was complicated. And he was playing with about a 50-piece live orchestra, and Linda was singing live.
Wow.
So, all pressure is on the piano player at that moment. The piano's got to sound great. You don't want to take any time. You want to make sure it's mic'd well. Everything's got headphones, which we don't think about in a concert situation. Everything's got to be nailed. And it was going great. It was going great. And we put Linda up to asking Robbie if he could pose it up a half step. In any case, it went great, but I just wanted to point out, the piano player is one of the few people in the orchestra who routinely has to play a solo that could be easy or very hard, and could be 2 bars long or 200 bars long. And they've got to be ready for it. They don't know what they're going to get a lot of times. So anyway.
Been in that situation myself. Anybody's got to take a solo. It's nerve-wracking, especially when it's going to be recorded.
I've got a real quick story, Ethan, if we have 1 minute.
Yeah, I'll just say really quick, thanks for everyone for joining. We put some links in the chat, a feedback form. Please click that, give us your feedback, what went well, what we can improve on, and a link there if you haven't signed up for Del Fondrick's Masterclass, which will start in about an hour. You can join that. There's a link in the chat. And I'll hand it back to you, Arlen.
Let me just say, before you go, Arlen, thank you, Frank. Thank you so much, man. That was precious information.
It's really my pleasure. David, you said to me yesterday, hey, man, don't worry. It's going to fly by. And guess what? It's flown by. I've really enjoyed myself. I hope I've given somebody some information that's of any help at all. But
absolutely. Thank you, brother.
I'm honored to be here, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
we're running out of time. I just want to thank you, Frank, and keep up the great work. We'll check out your work.
Thank you.
All right.
You can go ahead, Arlen, if you had a story. Go for it. We can hang over.
If we have a quick minute, I just remembered a funny thing, because sometimes we think we have Frank was saying expect the unexpected, basically, and I was in Sao Paulo on a recording session for a classical pianist. I had everything right for the piano. It was a rental for Steinway sent me on this job. Everything was right, controlled environment. I went to the control room and I was hearing this out of the speakers, this little tiny metallic noise every time she would use the pedals. And I went back, I checked everything. The piano was fine. I had her sit down and play, and then I kept hearing the noise. So I just went down with my head to the pedals. Sure enough, she had these little tiny chains down her shoes, decorative chains that would go up and down when she was using the pedal. So I said, we have 3 choices. Take off the shoes, put something on the other shoe, or I cut the chain, or I tape the chain. She said, cut them off. So I cut off the chains, and that saved the session.
Wow.
So you never know what to expect.
Well, it's great that you could hear that, though. You
hear it through the speakers, but
big bucks.
Yeah, that's what the ears come in,
And investigate. Yeah, that's not only a story that you tell, that's a story that they tell. And then they say,
Yes.
you got to get this tech in your studio. He can find the smallest things and fix them. So that's great.
All right.
Thank
Ladies
you.
and gentlemen, thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you,
Frank,
David.
Frank, I just want to give you a minute if you had a last word or something. You know, there's a lot of people here. We did some cutting off, but if you want to say something to wrap it up, I'd like to give you the last word. We really appreciate having you here. We'll check out all your music now. We're getting hip to things that you've already done that we've listened to, which are wonderful. But yeah, give us a last word if you like. I want to give you the floor.
I was just going to add to what Arlen said. It's more of a story than anything else. But the first day I ever met Randy Newman, he said, "Don't bother trying to get my foot sound out of the pedal because no one's ever been able to do it." And he keeps time with his foot on the sustain pedal.
Oh, wow.
Push it down all the way. He just bangs on it. The whole piano
So
goes
it goes tuck, 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 tuck.
low. It's the low frequency that resonates into the piano, not the tapping sound. So, all we could do is have him take his shoes off and hope that he tapped in time. And it's, that's just what it is. He can't stop. If you stop him from tapping his foot, he can't play. So, you do what
It'd
you
be like stopping Glenn Gould from singing.
That's
That's
exactly
right. That's exactly right.
Hey, I'm going to jump because I actually am in the middle of a project.
All right.
That doesn't have any piano in it. You see, expect the unexpected. Sometimes there's no piano.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you for inviting me, David. I'm happy to see you. Carl and Arlen, it's very nice to meet you. Ethan, you too. It's really nice to meet you. And
It's been a pleasure.
Been a pleasure.
I hope it's been informative.
Excellent session.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll let you go. I'll sign off. We'll see you, those of you that'll join us in an hour, we'll see you then. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone. We really appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for giving us an hour of your time. Remember that you can catch us live online every Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.
That's right. Go to pianotechradio.com to register so you can interact live and ask questions of our guests.
See you next week.